gosh. I'm Captain Jim Sharp, and this is my little wife Meg beside me. We're here on a cold, typical Maine evening with the snow blowing outside there mixed with rain, and it's all going to freeze up tonight. Aha, Maine, it's nice to be back to Maine. This is the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum, South Rockland's finest maritime museum. You must agree, of all the maritime museums in South Rockland, this is certainly the finest one. Well, it seems like you've probably listened to this at least one time before. If you, hopefully, you've seen the first edition of the Snow Shipyard presentation that we're going to do tonight. 7 is the magic number. In 2007, I flunked retirement, and my wife and I started this museum. When I was 75 years old, bought this property at 75 Mechanic Street. If any of you did not see part one of the Snow Shipyard presentation, well, you better hold on to your seats because it's going to be a wild, exciting story. You'll have to go back and check it out. It's all on YouTube. Everything is on YouTube. And one great thing about electronics, it'll probably be there forever. Welcome, welcome to the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum. We're about to embark on this presentation telling you about the history of the Snow Shipyard back in the golden age of sail. This being Captain's Quarters, number 37 of these Captain's Quarters presentations we've done. And all of these people down here milling around in the lower picture, as disreputable as they look, they're all sea captains. They're all captains of the Maine Coast Windjammer Fleet. And, well, they're a whole lot of them since have gone over the bar, but there are a lot there that we recognize all that I'm there. Yeah, I'm there in the front. So if you know any of these guys, why, it'll bring back memories. Well, here, nestled on the rugged coast of Maine, is one of the most magnificent protected harbors in all of New England. Rockland, Maine. Back in the day, it was truly an amazing place. During the fantastic age of sail, Rockland was not just a bustling seaport. It was the hub of shipbuilding activity. It was the hub of all of the activity that earned its place as the 4th largest seaport in the United States. Yeah, I said the 4th largest seaport in the United States. You've probably heard that before. Well, it's worth repeating. Shipping out tons and tons of cargo, all by sailing vessel back in those days. She takes her place, Maine takes her place, Rockland takes her place right behind Philadelphia, New York, and Boston in tonnage moved. Pretty exciting, pretty darned exciting place. And the Sail Power and Steam Museum was established right on this terra firma. This is the Snow Shipyard. These hallowed grounds right here. An amazing, amazing shipyard back in those days. Just on the south end, look at the vessels crowded into this harbor. Oh my God. It's the Snow Shipyard I'm carrying on about here, not to speak of the repair work that went on and on. Right in the center of this picture, there are 2 railways up there, and they've got both of them filled up with vessels they're working on. But besides all of the repair work that they did, and the repair work went on and on and on, they built over 3 score new documented vessels, barks, brigs, brigantines, and schooners, lots of schooners, 2, 3, and 4 masted, all the way up until 1919. What a busy place. All in all, for their own use, some newly built, some bought, some sold. They owned and sailed more than 75 different vessels in 140 years. This surely was the hub of the great wheel of shipbuilding that went on in New England. Maybe you remember in the first edition, we had this grouchy looking guy. This old grouchy looking guy is the old Captain Israel Snow, who started the Snow Shipyard, then the Snow family that carried on that yard down through the ages. Under his auspices, they built 15 large commercial sailboats, brigs, barks, all schooners in just 12 years. They built two of them at the same time on the railway. My God, it was an amazing, amazing production. All of these vessels were built one after another. And as I say, look at the dates and you'll see two of them launched the same year. Anyway, he died in 1875, and his son, Israel Larkin Snow, continued, took over running the yard up until 1899 when he finally passed away. And during the 24 years, they built all of these vessels here, close to a dozen new 2, 3, and 4-masted barks, brigantines, and schooners. An amazing array of vessels. Look down there just a little quickly, and you'll see what has happened to each one of them. Lost, capsized, ashore, wrecked over and over and over again, all the way down through the whole line of them. These vessels certainly lived a precarious life. 19 of these vessels, from their launching to their demise, these 19 vessels were the heart of the Snow fleet. On top of what they have here, they bought and sold, built and rebuilt. They restored, they repaired, they wrecked so many schooners. It's almost uncountable. Truly an amazing family business and a wonderful asset to the maritime community. When Larkin Snow passed away in 1899, the yard continued with his children, Captain John I. Snow, here with the cigar that he enjoyed most profusely. As he would wander through the shipyard, he and his brothers, Robert and Dade, they carried on with the family business, and that humming shipyard was very much an amazing humming yard. In 1899, Captain John enjoyed a thread of advice from his father, Larkin Snow, who passed away and was already on the other side. But he, Captain John I, was in the schooner Metsubishi in Tampa, unloading from a voyage, and he was in his bunk, lying in his bunk. He heard his father's voice saying, "Get out of the bunk, you're on watch." And it was the last communique from Captain I. Larkin Snow. I'd like to go on here, but I think we ought to interrupt now and give you a little bit of the commercial. We always have, a good program always deserves a good commercial. So we won't dwell on this very long. I want to move quickly because we have an awful lot to discuss, an awful lot to present here. Up in the upper left-hand corner, that's the old museum building. Back in 2007, when Meg and I were wandering around, we saw this building where Outward Bound had been. They enjoyed a new place down to the westward here, and they had moved. This building was left abandoned for 4 years. It started to fall down. The boiler blew up, and the whole complex was kind of going to the devil. Nobody seemed interested in it. But I thought to Megan, I said I thought it'd be kind of neat to start a museum here on the Snow Shipyard property. All of these hallowed ground, it's got history written all over it. So this was the first museum building. We renovated it. We put in all kinds of wonderful rooms and paraphernalia in different rooms, and now it's solid full. We have so much there. It is stuffed, and it's fantastic things. We have a Arctic exhibit in there, the schooner Bowden, parts and pieces from the Bowden, and all kinds of Arctic memorabilia that Donald McMillan had given me. We have a steam house with 12 running steam engines. We have dynamite basins, a boat shop in there, and lots and lots of things you'll really enjoy. You come and take a look around. You just got to spend some time in there. It takes 2 hours to just have a cursory look. Over on the right-hand side there, you see a schooner out in the front yard. We thought the ambiance could be improved. We had this schooner that was donated to us, and I thought, well, we ought to take it out of the water and plant it in the front yard. So we dug a hole, brought it over, and put it right there. Now you can go aboard that vessel and tramp around it and look at it. A pretty good sized schooner. Have your picture taken by the wheel there, and I promise you it won't rock it. You won't get seasick. Down below, after the other building was filled up, we built a new building. And this was our new building completed about 2 years to 3 years ago. And we have it pretty well filled now. We've got a beautiful 38-foot stern paddle wheel steam launch with a wood burning boiler in there. And I hope to hook that up so that we actually run it. And we have a lot of other donkey engines in there, some very interesting engines. We also have the Light Horseman, the vessel that Weymouth brought over from England in 1605 and discovered Penobscot Bay. And over on the left side, of course, that's the launching of the Keating and the Snow Shipyard. This is what we dwell on, the Snow Shipyard, one of the foremasters that they built there. And you can see the people up aloft on top of the cross trees riding that vessel down, making her way into the briny, making 12 knot stern way. Look at that stern wave. Well, anyway, fantastic vessel, and we'll tell you more about that later on in some of these presentations. One thing that really I get a big kick out of is our skiff program. SKFF, Sail Kids for Free. It's really an amazing program. We take kids that are 8 to 14 years old, and we put them in this training program and send them out to sea. I'm just trying to fix this. There it goes. That's better. Skiff program. 8 to 14-year-old kids. You can see in the upper left there. Those little kids, little tiny kids. They don't know anything about a boat. They don't know anything about a tiller. And they jump in the boat and they get all excited. Here we're teaching them how to set the sails, get it set there just right so that they can sail these little Optimus prams. These are international class, wonderful little boats. We have 25 of them. And we take a class of about 12 at a time and put the kids in there. We put them slide the boats overboard and push them away. And then we go out with a little outboard skiff and we teach them how to sail. And they learn that minds are like sponges, of course, and they learn so quickly. And just by and by, they get the hang of it, and they're racing each other. They're trying to beat their buddies, and it's just so gratifying to see them do that. The first thing we do is take their telephone away from them, get them away from the computer, and they have all natural element that they have to deal with, Mother Nature. And it really makes adults out of little kids. It makes me warm and fuzzy all over. It's a great program. We take, well, as I say, we graduated 150 kids last year, 150 kids the year before that, and the year before. Over 500 kids we put through this program so far. Not a one of them is drowned. And on Wednesday, they learn to turn the boats over and swamp them. And then they get up, they right them back up again, and they pump them out, bail them out, and of course their buddies in the next boat next to them, so they're bailing the water into the other boat, and then they have a water fight, and they just love it. Oh my God, it's more fun. Competition is the name of the game. You can see in the lower right here, this guy with a grin, or the great grin. That's a Pepsodent smile, they call it, I guess. Great grin on his face. That's his buddy. He just passed his buddy in the other boat, and that's what it's all about. By Friday, these kids are out here in the lower picture and they're racing around the buoys out there, just having the time of their lives. And they come back with smiles and they just want to go back and do it all over again the very next week. But we have a whole new class coming in the next week. So we have to just make sure they learn, make sure they go out of here with some kind of great knowledge about it. We also do adult sailing with sail training. If you are a sailor, we have two friendship sloops, classic boats. If you sail a classic boat, you probably never go back to sailing another one. And there in the center on the left is a friendship sloop, the white background. And on the other side of it, on the right side of it, is the Herreshoff 12.5. Both of these are 1920s classic boats. All the way over to the right is our friendship sloop, one of our friendship sloops. The Persistence has a party out there. In the center, you can see the friendship sloop Blackjack, the oldest Wilberforce friendship sloop in the world. Wilberforce built more friendship sloops than any other man, 500 of them during his career. Unbelievable career, but that's a whole other story that I'll have to tell you about some other time. Up in the upper left, you can see our Sunday Jam. Every Sunday for the last 16 years, we've had a free open Sunday Jam. We serve coffee and donuts or some kind of goodies, and people bring their instruments and play tunes that they know and love, mostly classic, most classic, semi-classic, and classical jazz and folk. But it's all acoustic music, and everybody loves it every Sunday afternoon, all afternoon. Down below, you can see our tent. We set up a great big tent down on the beach. We have weddings and receptions and parties and cruise boats and all kinds of people come there for different functions. They can cook on the beach. We serve lobsters. We have a little bluegrass band that plays for the lobster bakes. And that's what we do over in the lower left there. That's Granddad. He's taken one of the dynamite pace and catboats and taking grandson out for a little toot on that boat, teaching him something about sailing. Uh, if you're a good sailor, we'll hone your skills. We'll teach you even more about it. Thank you so much. I want to tell you, we couldn't do it without you. It's all supported from donations like you good people. And you send us a couple of $100 and we'll put another kid in the boat and we'll get him out there. It's all free for the kids, but any donation and volunteering as well, all gratefully received. Well, let's see if we can get back to the Snow Shipyard now. Here's a very early picture of the yard, one of the earliest pictures that I've been able to find. Once you notice the big building right down in the very left side there, the big building is the Thoyer shed. That's where they saw up the stock when it comes from the forest and get it ready to put into a boat. You notice the pipe coming out of the front of that building and a great stack of white sawdust, a huge stack of white sawdust down below it. And right to the right side of it, you can see the logs piled up there, full piles of logs, all getting ready to saw up right there. A little bit further over to the east, or a little bit further over to the right, past the working area, you can see there are two schooners being built at the same time in tandem, one ahead of the other. Two schooners being built at the same time. And that's the way they did it back in those days. My God, it's just unbelievable. Two of them on the railway just over to the right of where they're building those two boats. Two vessels on the railway there in for repairs, and two or three more vessels waiting in line to get on the railway. A busy, busy yard back in that time. My God, look up on the up at the top of the picture. That's Mechanic Street, and you can see all the cars of the crew that work in the yard there, all parked along Mechanic Street. An amazing yard. A little bit later on now, 1896, you can see all these vessels, just about all of them are part of the Snow Shipyard fleet. They owned all of those sailing vessels. The only two strangers there are the two steamboats on the railway. They're being worked on, being repaired, and so on. All the way on the left side there, the Carolyn Gray, a wonderful little brigantine that they made a lot of money with her, carrying cargo all around. And all the way over on the right side is John I. Snow, a great three-masted schooner just back from the Caribbean, where they pick up salt and they bring it back and put it in the salt shed right there. The waterfront buzzing with activity. Uh, you'll be able to match the vessels with the names later on when you get a chance to linger over that picture. This is a little bit later in the 1930s. It looks like kind of a slow time at the yard, but I wanted to show you this picture. There are no vessels hauled out on the railway, and nothing being built at the moment. Very strange, because it's an unusual sight, right? In the center of the picture are the two vessels laid up there, and they're the Clink brothers, two three-masted schooners. You'll notice the mound of sawdust is gone. they've constructed a basin there, a big black rectangular basin. And this basin is tidal. The water comes in, the tide fills that up when the tide comes in full. And what that is, they take the wood before it goes into a new vessel and they kill it. They put it in that basin and they let it sit in that basin for, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months. And it leaches the sap out of the logs and it soaks up salt water, and salt is a preservative. So these all these logs are pickled before they saw them up and put them into the vessels, and it gives the vessel a much longer life. And that's why they say, "Yes, sir, if it's a snowbuilt ship, it's a good one." And the big white building in the middle is the salt shed where I tell you they bring salt up. They pack salt in these vessels between the planking and the ceiling and the frames, raw salt, because these are dead air spaces in a vessel and it fosters mold and rot. And if they fill them up with salt, it pickles them. And the vessels last a whole lot longer. That pickling process keeps the wood from rotting. And that's why, snow-built vessels were recognized all over for their quality. Here's another, come on, come on. Another view of the little basin at high tide. You can see all the stock floating around on top. With, as I say, 6 months of pickling, the wood is rot resistant. Beyond the basin, right over on the left-hand side there, is the schooner Mitsubishi. She's on the stocks. She's just being built there. You can see the sort of the framework that's piled up there. Just beyond her is a bark hauled out on the railway in for repairs, and beyond that is a schooner. Looks like the schooner right in the middle here, between the Clink brothers and the Mitsubishi. That schooner looks like they're putting a new topmast in the mainmast there, the two main topmasts. This is along about 1901. But what a busy yard it was in spite of everything. It's just amazing how the yard goes on and on and on. Well, let's take a quick look at how these magnificent vessels are put together. They don't have any drawings. They don't have any plans. They never had that kind of thing back in those days. If you needed a vessel, you got in touch with the master builder of the yard. There are a number of master builders that get their reputations from the vessels that they build. And you go to him and you say, "What? I'd like to have a vessel." He says, "Well, what's the commercial purpose of your vessel? What are you going to carry? Are you going to carry granite? Are you going to carry lime? Are you going to carry wood? What are you doing?" Well, you get your heads together and different vessels for different purposes. So of course, the master builder will use his vast experience and he'll get out a piece of pine and he'll whittle out a half model of the kind of a vessel that you want. Some of them very burdensome, some of them long and sleek, whatever would be the suitable vessel that you'd be happy with. And then they would take that model and they would segment it very carefully, cut it in little strips, elongated strips like that. And these longitudinal pieces, you know, being very careful and with a very sharp pencil, they lay these lines down on the floor of the drifting table, on the floor of the loft, and mathematically expand them to full size, building the patterns, marking out the frames, reproducing very accurately the model of your dreams. There were so many vessels being built back in those days, so many vessels in the yard, the snow yard, that they would reproduce a successful vessel using the same molds and the same plans, the same ideas from the vessel before. If it was a little larger vessel you wanted, they would add a few more frames. And that's what they did. All of these vessels, these 6 vessels were built one after another down through the yard there. And they lengthened about one at a time from 2-masted schooners. They finally got up over 100 feet in length, and the sails got so big, they decided they'd put another mast in each of the last 2 that they built. They turned into 3-masted vessels. But that's what they would do. when they built so many of them, they could sort of cheat that way. Well, let's get started. First thing they do is stretch a keel. They call it stretching the keel when they lay a keel down for a new vessel. A huge timber, one great long piece of 90-foot tree from the hewn square, hewn with great care so that it's absolutely straight and perfect in all dimension. All done with a broad axe and an adze and a shipbuilder's acumen. Well, when that's done, of course, then they set up the framing table where they lay out the frames for the vessel on the right-hand side. Here you can see all these switches, each section of frames are trunneled together or bolted together. And when I say trunneled together, that's wooden dowels that hold, they drive through, making a hole small enough so that they can drive a piece of, well, usually they use ash or something like that, and use wooden pegs to hold them together. They get it all put together, and then the framing master shouts, "Frame up! Hello, all, frame up!" And the whole yard crew gang up together, and they set that frame up. Here's the whole gang of them. They're all standing there. They got pulleys and blocks and tackle and all kinds of paraphernalia to get that frame up and place it in place on the keel. Some of these great big rugged vessels, they are so huge and they're so framed so closely together, there's hardly any airspace between the frames. You can see here these frames uh, so closely. Everyone has to be aligned by hand by dubbing with an adze to give a flat place down there. You can see where they're dubbing the fresh wood down below so that the plank will lay on each frame evenly all the way back through. Dub, 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 all hours and hours and hours on these big vessels. But that's what they had to do. Hundreds and hundreds of frames. Finally, we get all the way back to the transom, and they set up the transom. But, oh my God, you could just hardly imagine the number of frames in these great, huge, large vessels. How many thousands of trees it took to get just the right curves. And all these pieces all had to fit together very accurately. Oh, gee. And now the vessel starts to take shape all the way back through you. You're looking out through the stern of it, and back aft, you can see in the run the reverse curve of the frames. And uh, you can start to recognize it as some kind of a large schooner. Now the planking process will begin. Take a look at the planking stock piled up at the bottom of the picture there. All that planking in the foreground. All you do is go over there, measure it up, grab one, put it into the steam box, steam the living hell out of it until it's like a noodle. Now this is a piece of maybe 3 or 4 inch thick planking. It's probably 30 or 40 feet long. While it's while it's all hot and like a noodle, you put it up against the vessel and nail it and spike it and trunnel it and bolt it into place, bend it in where it's got to go. And man-killing work, especially in the winter when it's 10 above zero or 10 below zero, which it very may well be in Maine. My God, what a job it is to plank these great, huge, big vessels like that. Well, then, of course, you got to begin making the masts. Here you can see a vessel in frame, all those frames stuck up there. Now they got to get ready for the masts as well. So, very, very carefully, a stick is chosen. They have to get a straight tree with enough heft to be able to relieve it of all its sapwood. Sapwood's no good on a mast. You got to have heartwood. I built several of them out of Oregon fir, and it is a preferred kind of stock to use. Um, you, Many a pine has been used in the process, though, but sometimes you have to use what you get. I did mast for the Bowden, I did mast for the Adventure, and mast for the Roseway, and when you could get a good piece of Western fir, that's the way to go. Anyway, just like the keel, you take it, take a tree, and the first thing you do is square it up. You hew it with a broad axe and add square it up straight and true, right to the desired diameter. Then you start to hew off the corners until she becomes 8-sided. Everything must be carefully and honestly whittled out. The final result depends on this. No cheating. Now you repeat the process again. Cut the corners off until you have 16 sides. Then 32 sides, but that's more fun than a barrel of monkeys because you see this happening all the time. The thing is shaping itself and you see the results. So it's fun building a mast. And finally, you go for 64 sides. There at 64 sides, all the spar makers in the yard, they all say, well, now that you're at 64 sides, any damn fool can plane it round. From that point, you count and get a round stick. Then, of course, the mastheads have to be shaped and the rigging got together. Well, to move these spars around the yard, they have half a gallimander. I don't know if you know what a gallimander is, but you Google up a gallimander and it'll tell you it's a carriage that you can take very heavy weights in. These masts probably weigh 2 or 3 tons, even whittled out that way. But that's what they had in the yard to move all of this great heavy stuff around. Now I haven't even started on the deck and the deck beams and the waterways and the top timbers and the shelves and the clamps and the ceiling and the knees and the rails and the houses, bowsprits and jibbooms and topmasts and yardarms and on and on and on it goes. My God, I haven't got strength and hot air enough to tell you about how all that goes together. But it is an amazing amount of work, considering the prodigious amount of labor involved in just building one of these vessels. The production in the Snow shipyard is literally mind-boggling. When they can build some of these vessels 2 at a time, and some of them vessels every other year. Every other year, they built another one and launched every other. Oh, it's just mind-boggling. Gorgeous sailing vessels are so vulnerable too. My God, you get out that they get wrecked, they get stranded ashore, they get blown away in hurricanes. Some of them go out over the horizon on a beautiful sailing day and are never heard from again. Take the Addie Snow, for instance. The Addie Snow, built in 1876, lost with all hands, a family forever changed. Well, now I want to tell you about the Portland gale of 1898. It was November 26th. Old wind blew across the busy Larkin Snow shipyard at the edge of Rockland's crowded harbor. The new captain for the Addie Snow, just passed his test just a few weeks ago, been put in charge of the, oh, he was so proud. November 1st, to become a sea captain meant everything to him, it always had. On Saturday, November 6th, the Addie sailed out of Portland Harbor under clear skies and fresh breeze. Ah, we'll make good time today, the old captain, I should say the new captain said. Aye, the mate replied, that we will. The middle of the afternoon, however, the wind stopped blowing and the schooners ceased to move ahead. A strange bronze light filled the sky. Bad luck. The new captain thought a humdinger is on its way. But without wind in the sails, there was no way to reach a safe harbor. When the last strange light had fallen from the sky and twilight of a winter's evening began, the harsh wind was picking up. All along the Atlantic coast, the Addie Snow began to move again, but the waves washed higher and higher over the deck. Fore and aft, the Addie seemed to sink lower and lower and lower into the sea. The skipper tied himself with a rope to the wheel. Icicles hung from his red mustache and from his eyebrows. Both, both masts in the gale were soon ripped from the deck. A great cracking sound over the roar of the wind as they fell alongside. They beat against the side of the schooner. The Portland gale was in its full fury. Hundreds and hundreds of vessels would sink, and hundreds of people would die as a result. Captain of each of the snow schooners were instructed, in the event of an emergency, grab the cabinet door on the medicine chest down below and throw it overboard, because every snow vessel had the name of the vessel engraved on that cabin door. More than 200 vessels were lost in the Portland gale, their bones scattered over 95 miles of Cape Cod beaches. A little distance from Race Point, the top of Cape Cod, the cabinet door of the Addie Snow was found, along with a little toy boat model which was in her cabin, indicating she must have foundered not far from here. But there were no survivors. The same gale took the big and able Portland, the steamer Portland, with 291 passengers to their watery graves right in that same area. No one knew where this was. No one knew the fate of the Portland until in 1944 they found the remains of her on Stillwagon Bank. Evidence indicated that the Addie and the Portland had possibly collided. Near zero visibility, heavy seas, and Allen Gale, the old granite-laden Addie. Did she cave in the Portland's midship side? Did she make the great big piece missing out of the side of the Portland and sank both vessels with all hands? So ended the life of the Addie Snow. Next vessel in line, cunning little vessel called the Jenny Greenbank. Isn't she a cute little thing? Launched in 1881, set off on a voyage to New Orleans. I Larkin Snow, Israel Larkin Snow, was her captain. At 52 years of age, he was set off to New Orleans with a load of cargo on there. He swore, "This is my last command." He said, "My last voyage. I'm staying home. I'm going to run the railway and the shipyard from now on." Well, the Jenny had quite an exciting life. Come a big storm, she was down in Long Island Sound. And in the middle of the storm, she was struck by lightning. The lightning entered the mainmast, shattering the mainmast. It went down through the mainmast, down into the hold, came out the stern post. The crew were all prostrated. She escaped with slight damage. 1 month later, she was again crossing Long Island Sound, and she was struck by lightning again, shattering the mainmast again, down into the hold and out the stern post. Again, the crew were prostrated. Both times with the crew all recovered. Then in 1897, she was struck by a squall off of York, Maine, and turned bottom up. Turned bottom up. The captain and two men sat on the bottom, and they managed to get up on the top and hang on to the keel. It turned upside down, hang on to the keel all night long until they were discovered at dawn, and they could be rescued. Through the rough seas, it was quite a job. Reports say she was righted. They don't give up on these boats just because they turn upside down. She was towed into York Beach, and she was sold. She went into another career after that. Well, another little schooner, the Woodbury Snow. She was an interesting little vessel. Cute little vessel, isn't she? Under full sail up in the harbor there, getting underway. Woodbury was built in Camden. In 1844, she was named the Peary. Captain Israel Snow bought her in 1865, and he used her hard, some hard, and she needed lots of help. So in 1883, she was put into the snow yard, and she was completely rebuilt. Pardon me, completely rebuilt. renamed the Woodbury Snow after they rebuilt in honor, of course, uh, Israel Larkenshaw's son, Woodbury. He was then 2 years old. And after they got done rebuilding it, there was scarcely an old timber left in it. It was an all brand new boat, just completely brand new boat. So after a lifetime of difficulties, all these vessels go through groundings and shipwreck and fire and so on. The Woodbury, with a cargo of lime, took fire in Boston Harbor. Lime was a terrible, terrible thing to carry in a vessel because it was so volatile. And she took fire in Boston. All the attempts to put this fire out failed. Lime in the pure state, hot lime is you get a little water on it and it bursts into flame and you can't put it out. That's a characteristic of it. All attempts to put it out failed. He just couldn't put that fire out aboard that vessel. He said, "Oh well, I'm taking her home anyway." So they chinked her up as best they could to keep the oxygen from making the fire burn brightly. And he brought her back to Rockland, still on fire. If you can imagine these guys, they were so determined. They finally got her to Rockland, and they finally were able to get down there and put the fire out. Oh my God, all kinds of bouquets were thrown on his success in bringing her home. She was repaired and sold then to her captain, Captain Tibbets, to go use again in the lime trade. Well, in May 1916, with a cargo of lime, the Woodbury Snow caught fire again in Rockport Harbor and sunk right there in the middle of the harbor in Rockport. 3 of the crew, of course, were saved. She had lived 72 years, a long life for a limer. I guess I should really maybe explain that a little bit more. They take limestone and they cook it in a kiln. Rockland was famous for the lime kilns back in the old days. They shipped more barrels of lime out of Rockland than anywhere else in the United States. Rockland was an amazing place for the shipping of lime down to New York and Boston and places like that. But quick lime is made after they cook it in a kiln and they put it in barrels and put it aboard the vessels. Well, the vessels leak down through the deck and they leak through the bottom, and the barrels leak. And sure enough, many times the lime would catch fire and you can't put it out unless the vessel sinks. That puts it out. But anyway, it's just such a terrible disaster to have a fire at sea. That was the end of 72 years of the little limer. Um, another disaster. Now, we have another vessel here to show you. In March 3rd, 1893, a handsome three-masted schooner built in the Larkin Snow Yard launched yesterday and was the subject of many complimentary remarks by those that saw her. With the yard crew back in those days, the yard crew, big yard crew back in those days, 35 men built this vessel. You can see her in stocks, the Lavinia Snow, over on the very right-hand side, with all her frames sticking up in the air. The 2 vessels behind the crew here are on the railway up for repairs. 2 big old schooners up there. 35 men. They took 2.5 years to build this vessel. That's a long time in the snow yard. And no finer vessel was ever built here at the Snow Shipyard. Hundreds came to see her launch. And oh my goodness, what a great launching it was. Here she is getting ready for her launch, all painted white, all gussied up, and she's just about to go down the ways there. You can tell because the tugboat on the other side of her has blasted her whistle off. You can see the steam rising up from her whistle. So that means that she had started or just is in the process of starting down. There's a guy sitting on the bowsprit up there going to ride her down in. Look at the crowd watching it, the crowd on deck and so on. People up in the rigging, somebody standing on the cross trees on the mizzen mast there, going to ride her down into the water. And what an exciting time. You can see the ladies in their bonnets and their skirts sitting on the planking stock that they have down here in the lower part of the picture to watch this go down into the briny for the first time. She is, of course, the Lavinia Snow, and the well-known historian John Levitt, who was the director of the Mystic Seaport Museum, he describes the Lavinia Snow as, by all odds, and I quote, by all odds, the handsomest, most beautifully proportioned, and a fine example of down east shipbuilders' art. She was well cared for, despite several accidents. She has retained her original sheer and is very handsome all the way through. Right, her handsome appearance right up to the end. Lavinia Snow is the fine product of her heritage, while these coastal sailing ships still existed in full flower. We have a wonderful, complete model of the Lavinia Snow in the museum, all rigged and ready. You got to come and see that. Built by Dwayne Mussey. We also use the Lavinia Snow for our logo on our sign, the old Snow Shipyard, and for our logo for the museum. Lavinia Snow, was it luck or was it really weather wisdom? That occurred November 27th, 1898. Remember 1898, the Portland breeze? Remember that took the Addie Snow? Was it really weather wisdom that saved Lavinia from a most remarkable, almost certain death? A small tugboat was out cruising north of Cape Cod looking for a tow. The day was unreasonably warm and only a light breeze, just very light breeze. The barometer stood at 30 inches. The little tug hailed a great large schooner there. He was almost becalmed, wasn't making any time at all. Looking for business, but her complacent master abruptly declined the tow because he said, it's a Saturday. I can't unload tomorrow, but being Sunday, you might as well wait for a breeze and sail on in there rather than pay a tugboat to do it. The tug dejectedly left and headed for a three-master about 4 miles distant. It turned out that was the Lavinia Snow. And he pulled up alongside. As he approached, he saw an entirely different scene on deck. All was a bustle. A hawser was being hauled out on deck, brought out through the hawse pipes, up forward. Her excited Portuguese skipper eagerly shouted to the tug, we want your tow. Grab my hawser. Throw me in there quick as you can. His nervousness seemed a little unusual to the tugboat, but deeply loaded, the Lavinia proved to be quite a heavy tow for that little tug. But he took her hawser and he started in with her. And he started as soon as he started when it took her in tow and they started to make a couple of knots, the weather started to turn. And it turned abruptly and it changed and the sky darkened and it became overcast and it began to snow. And the wind came out of the northeast, rapidly increasing in force. By the time they passed Boston Light, it had become a howling blizzard. The tug barely had enough power to handle that big loaded schooner. He tugged and she pulled and she pulled and she tugged and pulled as if their lives depended on it, and it did. 2 hours later, he was thankfully anchored between the ferries in the inner harbor of Boston. Lavinia was one of the very few vessels left afloat the next morning. That big schooner that saw nothing in the sky and declined the tow, lost with all hands. Nobody ever heard from her again. It was presumed that the alert Portuguese master on the Lavinia was watching the high cirrus clouds and didn't like their movement. That precious dislike saved his ship, saved his crew, and saved himself. Would it be called seamanship? This breeze of wind was named the Portland Gale of '98. As I say, over 200 vessels were lost. 200 vessels, and their bones were scattered all over Cape Cod. Millions of dollars of damage. Steamer Portland was lost with 200 souls, and so on. Well, 1903, the Lavinia suffered a collision in York Harbor while passing the liner Deutschland. She was so damaged so severely that she sunk with a load of lumber consigned to New York City. Raised and repaired and returned to duty, the last trip of the schooner, whose appearance was still graceful and straight after 37 years of working service, she cleared from Philadelphia. 1930, the captain, in the obscurity of the storm headed south, mistook the flashing light of Hatteras, thought he was in the clear, and turned to beat off the coast, went ashore on Hatteras. When the schooner struck, her fate was sealed. Hatteras was the graveyard of so many vessels. The smashing seas broke entirely over the stranded schooner, driving her further and further up on the beach. The wreck symbolizes not just the loss of the Lavinia Snow, but 1930 spelled the end of the Yankee schooner era. The coasting schooner era, the roads took over, the trucks took over, the railroads took over, what the schooners did, the trucks and the boxcars did what the schooners did. It was the end of the schooner era. The next launch in 1896 was a schooner Methabesic, a native word given to a pond near Rockland, which we now call Chickenwacky. If you're from Rockland, you know that's Chickawacky. But she's a good-sized schooner, a sister ship to the Lavinia Snow, just as pretty, just as beautiful, a sheer on her, and a gorgeous white paint job on her. She was a magnificent schooner. Captain John I. Snow was the master builder, and for the first 4 years, John I. Snow was the captain on this vessel, master on the vessel. He carried ice from Iceboro, a little tiny village on the Kennebec River, named for its celebrated product, ice, in the wintertime, stowed cargo, huge blocks of ice in her hold, covered with sawdust for insulation, and bound for Richmond, Virginia, and all the great South, where they wanted ice in their drinks. This next photograph is a great little photograph. Here's the Mitsubishi on the ways, getting ready for her launch. Everything done, all painted, and she's going to be going in, probably within a week now. And depending on whether they put the sails on, sometimes they put the sails on them before they're launched. These two buildings, these two little buildings, are 8-sided buildings, and they have a capstan in each one of them. And capstans are, do you know what a capstan is? If you don't know what a capstan is, it's a vertical tube, uh, a winch, and the railroad that has a chain that comes out around the capstan, and they had 4 horses in these little round houses, and they cranked the capstan around, drawing the vessels up on the railway. Well, these were right from the earliest days of the Snow Shipyard, and they were quite a sight to behold, and quite a valuable little item. Well, there's a fence around the yard down there now. Well, eventually they got steam. They replaced the horses with steam. And that steam engine hooked to both railway. They didn't need 2 houses then, just the 1 house for the steam engine. Eventually they put electric motor on there, and they could draw all these vessels up with electric motor. The steam engine they threw out in the yard, in the mud. It was there for 100 years. We picked it, dug it out of the mud, and we restored it and put it in the museum. You can see it now in our steam house. The vessel, the Snow Shipyard, steam engine that hauled these vessels up on the railway. Well, there was only one of these little houses left, and it still stands there today. Well, one day, there's a fence around the yard, and it's usually the gate's closed and it's all private. One day, Jamie Wyeth was over there, and he decided he wanted to do a painting of this round house, and somebody had left the gate open. He went in and he sat down and he got his easel out and started to paint this little round house. All of a sudden, the night watchman came along. He must have been on his rounds or something. He says, "Oh my God!" He says, "What are you doing here? What are you doing?" Well, Jamie says, "Oh, I just wanted to paint this. I'm not hurting anything. I'm not touching anything. I'm just going to paint this little building." "You get the hell out of here! You can't come in here like this is private property. I don't care if your name's Abraham Lincoln. You get the hell out of here." So the night watchman threw him off the property. I don't know if Jamie said, "I'm Jamie Wyeth. I'm Jamie. I'm not going to hurt anything." He said, "I don't care who you are. You get." I don't know if Jamie ever got his picture done or not, but that's just a little side uh, the thing of interest. So anyway, where are we here? Really a great photograph. You you can see that building now if you come by the roundhouse. You can see it in the shipyard down there. Captain 1902, Captain Wingfield became master of the vessel, joined her in Perth Amboy, and I guess I'd like to read from the logbook, Captain Wingfield logbook, and I quote, "We made our way out of Sandy Hook on Sunday morning, November 30th, 1902. It was Tuesday. At midnight, during an easterly snowstorm, we went into Boston to find a little protection. On Thursday, with the wind northeast and snowing, we went into Salem. At noon Monday, we left Salem on a clear, pleasant day with a westerly wind. There was a schooner, Etta Simpson, left this port with us. We were both in there together, seeking shelter. A storm came up and she went lost with all hands never heard from again. In the forthcoming storm, about 4 p.m., this blizzard struck us. We ran along, we took in the spanker, we then reefed the foresail. With the raging wind and the headsails, they all blew away. The wind was so strong, all the headsails blew away. While the men were out on the jibboom furling the outer jib, the flying jib wire pennant parted, causing the sail to thrash itself to pieces right over the heads of the men on the bowsprit. It was worth a man's life to be within 20 feet of this sail. It was a miracle. I counted it a miracle that a man's head was not cut off. The mainsail, the jib, the forestaysail, all burst and blew away. As we approached Goose Rock, abreast of Cape Elizabeth, the vessel was almost unmanageable. As the gale was at its full peak and the sea vapor was so thick, you could only see a vessel's length. That's all you could see about the length of the schooner, barely see the bow. My face, my ears, my nose were all frozen. Some of my men were worse off. It should be borne in mind the members of our own crew were so frostbitten to be practically helpless. The hull was perfectly tight, snow-built vessel, but the vessel was so badly iced you couldn't see the spaces between the ratlins. If you don't know what ratlins are, they're that ladder-looking thing that go up the shrouds that the sailors run up in order to service the topsails and things like that. These ratlins are probably a foot apart. The ice was so bad you couldn't see the space between the ladders. There was probably 50 tons of ice in the rigging. From the after part of our forward house, the vessel was a regular whaleback. Now, just for your information, you can see the forward house way up by the foremast there. It's about 6 feet high. It sticks up above the deck. And from there back, you couldn't tell the house. It all looked like the back of a whale. It was all so frozen, right solid rail to rail. And back to the quote, the sails were so badly frozen and securing the mainsail, putting extra battens on the hatches, the men would have to cling to the port side. The vessel, it was so badly iced, everything we touched or walked on was slick. Neither the rails or the ratlins were visible. The foresail was repaired by lamplight in the snow and standing water. Then we unbent the mizzen topsail and bent it on the jib stay for a jib. That's all we had left. We set it and stood towards the land. Friday afternoon, in the snow and vapor, we finally made land. We ran down by log, dead reckoning, until abreast of Seguin, and tried to get the mainsail down to save the spars. But this, a new sail, was so iced up it cut itself to ribbons as we lowered it. While the vessel wallowed in the seas, Thursday, we wore the vessel around. In doing so, the fore gaff broke, tearing and crippling the foresail. And after 2 p.m., Captain Slade of the fishing vessel Patriot of Gloucester, a fishing schooner, hove in sight. When Captain Slade saw our plight, with the loss of sails, the rigging completely iced up, but with the hull still tight, a snow vessel, not leaking, he called for volunteers to help. Only 3 brave souls out of a crew of 19 came forth to board us and lend assistance. At this time, we were 60 miles south of Matinicus Rock in a northeast gale, and snow and spume, all frostbitten and immobile. At 2 p.m., we made land, having substituted the broken foregaff with the main gaff by lamplight. In the snow and the sea spray, we repaired the foresail and bent it on the jib stay as a jib. With these crazy sails set, we again made towards land, which proved to be Seguin Island. At 9 p.m. Friday, we finally anchored in sight of Portland Head. 3 of our men were taken off immediately to the hospital. I cannot say enough of the first mate, John Wood. He, with both hands badly frozen, proved to be a man of sterling worth. Through this blizzard, also the same praise is due the 3 fishermen. Volunteers who came to our aid were D. Wilson, Fred Fraser, Olaf Herman. Over the value of their services, I don't feel I can say enough. To understand our position when they came aboard, it should be borne in mind the members of our own crew were so frostbitten to be practically helpless, standing in seawater up to their waist at times, with a vessel so iced up that the port side rail and rigging ratlins could not even be seen. We cannot express our admiration of these men. The winter's heroism shown by these New England sailors will not soon be forgotten. As soon as the schooner Metzebeesic is refitted, including new foregaff and mizzenmast, she'll be ready for her next voyage. Her hull is still found to be perfectly tight, a snow vessel. Her 7-year career, triumphant so far. Finally, that night we anchored in sight of Portland Head. Poor old vessel, so badly iced you couldn't see the spaces between the ratlins. There must have been 50 tons of ice in the rigging, and after the forward part of the house, regular whaleback of frozen ice, just a few of the men putting extra battens in the hatches, forced to stand to their waist, and all of that, iced up so bad they couldn't walk. Finally, the vessel was towed into Portland, where all the hands were put ashore and taken to the hospital. The craft, in no condition to sail, was then towed to Belfast, where she discharged her cargo of coal, still in perfect condition, and subsequently came back to Rockland, where she is now fitting out for her last trip. Unquote. Those were all the captain's messages. Sadly, the Mitsubishi met with disaster in 1920. She was taking a cargo to Cuba and bringing back a cargo of coconuts to New York. But one of the hurricanes, she was driven ashore on Barbuda, one of the Leeward Islands in the Caribbean, and became a total wreck. A total wreck. So ended the career of the beautiful schooner Mitsubishi. Well, I can't tell you them all. There are just too many, too darn many damn good sea stories. And this next one is a damn good sea story about the schooner Matinic. It's a short one. You've had a lot of patience. I hope you're not snoring away in front of the television set now, or computer set, whatever you're watching it on. Uh, it's sad to say the schooner Matinic, she had a glorious launching, but didn't last very long, 5 years. Very beautiful vessel. What a beautiful, beautiful launching, attended by a huge crowd. John Gamage was the master builder of this vessel. And she, of course, a well-known master builder, and you could just tell. Look at that, the shear on that vessel, the rake on her bow, and just everything in such perfect proportion. Absolutely beautiful vessel. Getting ready there for her launch. Got the flags a flying. A couple of people out on the bowsprit, sitting there enjoying the view, and so on. The carriages there, getting ready. Some people coming and gathering, getting ready for her launch. It's going to come very soon. Well-known sea captain was asked his comments while everybody stood there in awe, viewing this magnificent vessel. He said, "Huh?" He said, "She's built by the Snows, Captain Snow's boys, in the same manner that Larkin Snow would have built it for himself." Saying that in Maine circles, that's about all you had to say. It's a snow vessel, and that is the whole story in a nutshell. Well, study the picture a moment and look at the crowd gathering in the yard with their carriages and so on. Here's the next picture. Still out on the bowsprit, people gathering up on the foredeck. You can see the stock laying down in front of the vessel, the lower part of the picture here, stock ready for the next vessel that they're going to build right away as soon as the Matinic is launched. And the people came and getting ready to ride her down for their first trip into the briny. Now look at this next picture. Oh my God. Now we're really getting ready for the launch. Look at the people out by the dolphin striker up there, the martingale, standing on the bobstays and crowding on deck. There's wall to wall people. You think anybody had a life jacket in those days? Oh, come on. Look at there's a steam rig down there, the steam rig on a carriage down in the foreground, and people all gathered around there. Guys up in the rigging, look at the guy down on the bosun's chair on the mizzen rigging. He's going to ride down in the mizzen there. Now, he's got an event. This was a big event. Look at this. Oh my God, here's the stern view. down underneath there. You can see the men are down there driving the wedges under the cradle of her, getting ready for her launch, and people everywhere, crowds and crowds lining both sides, getting ready for the event of a lifetime. And if you don't believe it, I'll give you an even closer view. All those people are getting ready to ride that vessel down into the water. She is an unbelievable vessel. Beautiful, beautiful vessel. Here's a painting by John Levitt, the curator of the Mystic Seaport Museum. He was also a pretty good artist. He admired this vessel. She immediately was chartered for bringing oak down to Virginia, then stone to Rockland, then common coal from New York. She was quite busy. Stone to Swan's Island, more and more stone for Annapolis, where they were doing some building down there. She was some busy, and even had a cargo of oyster shells and canned goods from Baltimore to Portland. She did suffer a little damage from a hurricane in September of 1903, but she was such a well-built vessel, it didn't hurt her much. She had a few little repairs in 1906. Now she's 5 years old. 5 years old and in excellent, excellent condition. She was outfitted to head to Stonington to load stone for New York. The Matinic was last seen February 21st, 1916, when she came through Hell Gate and reported a cargo of coal bound for Crotch Island, Stonington, Maine. She sailed away on a beautiful day out through the Narrows, and she was lost. Absolutely all hands and no trace. Well, I know you're getting itchy now. You're probably thinking, when is all of this going to end? Well, I'll tell you, the story of the Snow Shipyard went on for 140 years. It's hard to tell the story in as little as 140 minutes. Take, for instance, the William Bisbee. No, no, let's not take, for instance, William Bisbee. Let's not take another instance. But, before you're sound asleep and while I ramble on, take a look at this entire list we just talked about. All of these vessels, we just went through the first half of them. Not all of them, but just a few that I could pick out. I can't tell you about all of them. The story's much too long. Uh, we have to do the last segment. The lower part of these vessels are the bigger vessels. The four-masted vessels are coming up. But you looked at what happened to all these different vessels lost in the gale, wrecked, lost by lime fire, capsized, or Armona, all down through. There's only one vessel in there that rotted away up in a creek in what we might call a natural death, and that was the William Bisbee. You can see the William Bisbee down there in 1902, and here she is, a picture of her rotting away in her uh, demise. The rest of these vessels we'll have to do on the third issue of the Snow Shipyard presentation. So I'll just skip down quickly as I can, and we'll give you a real fast look at some of the vessels coming up and some of the things coming up, just so you have an idea of what we will be talking about down the way, and bigger vessels and more disasters and more happenings. The steam vessels that they use at the snow yard, all of these things we'll talk about in the next issue of the presentation. More launchings, bigger votes, more wrecks, more everything you can think of. The life in the snow shipyard, oh my God, it's absolutely amazing. But we'll give this in great detail in the third presentation. They even moved to the Spite House. Tell you about the Spite House. And during the war, the vessel they built during the war, they set records building vessels during the war. And here is a list you can look at later on when the things calm down here, and take a look at all the vessels, different vessels that the Snow Fleet, in the Snow Fleet, some tugs and some, every kind of vessel that they had. Very interesting list. If you want a good book to read, well, this is a gold medal bestseller. Uh, One of the best-selling books that we have here at the Sail Power Steam Museum. My memoirs, 40, 50 years of voyaging. Uh, it's sea stories. All of these different vessels. I own four of the biggest schooners on the coast here. And most of the stories have a pretty good element of truth to them. Anyway, want to thank you for coming. If you have any questions, now's a good time to speak up. I want to show you the ones the presentations we've already done. All of these vessels, all the Camden Windjammer fleet. We could, if you want to know about those vessels, if you want to know about tugboats, if you want to know about uh, pilots and cooks and just all kinds of different things. Here, looking ahead, we're getting down towards the end. Down here, we have Mapping the Ocean, April 15th. That's coming up in a week. And in 2 weeks, we've got the part 3 of the old Snow Shipyard. So we thank you all for listening. Any comments from the peanut gallery? Thank you all very much. We couldn't do it without you. Come and visit us at the Snow Shipyard. And if there are no more comments, I'd like to say good night. And I hope you've enjoyed our presentation.